Good morning. Would you all please stand and sing with us as we begin our service? You make it easy to love you. You are good and
you are kind.
you bring joy into my life. You make it easy to trust you. You have never left my side. You've been faithful every time. All I want is you, Jesus. All I want is you. You are the refuge I run to. You are the fire that leads me through the night. I'll follow you anywhere. There's a million reasons to trust you. Nothing to fear, for you are by my side. I'll follow you anywhere. Follow you anywhere. Oh, 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 I'll follow you anywhere. Oh, 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 Jesus, you came to my rescue. Took my place upon that cross. You redeemed what I had lost. Now my whole world revolving around you. You're the center of my life. You're the treasure. You're the prize. And all I want is you, Jesus. All I want is you. You are the refuge I run to. You are the fire that leads me through the night. I'll follow you anywhere. There's a million reasons to trust you. Nothing to fear, for you are by my side. I'll follow you anywhere. Follow you anywhere. Oh, 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 I'll follow you anywhere. Oh, oh, wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. Jesus, all I want is you. Wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. Jesus, all I want is you. Wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. Jesus, all I want is you. You are the refuge I run to. You are the fire that leads me through the night. I'll follow you anywhere. There's a million reasons to trust you. Nothing to fear, for you are by my side. I'll follow
Brad, I'm good. There we go. Good morning. I'm Dan Beck, one of your elders. And if there's any place to follow, it's following Jesus. We're glad to welcome you this morning. If you've never been here before, I want you to know this Monroe is a place we want you to feel at home. We want you to know the people beside you. So this morning, if you get a chance to meet somebody beside you don't know, they might be on the other aisle, the south side, north side, get to know them, because it's not about you just coming and getting something. It's what you can learn through others. And believe me, it's a blessing to do that. If you don't get our updates through the emails, that's kind of the normal system, or if you just want the elders to reach out to you and pray, there's connect cards in the pews. Take those, fill those out. We get prayer requests that sometimes they just want us elders to pray for. Sometimes it's prayer requests that we can send out to others in the congregation. Please use that. And as we go forward in 23, we look forward to serving God and following Him anywhere. Let's continue in worship.
Darkness we were waiting, without hope and without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory, to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom come, and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering, you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. In the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, and the Lamb had conquered death. Then the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. And the Church of Christ was born, in the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, in His bound in sin and nature's night. My night diffused a quickening ray. I woke the conjured flame with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose and forth and followed thee. Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? No condemnation now I dread, Jesus and all in Him is mine. Alive in Him, my living head, and clothed in righteousness divine. Bold I approach eternal throne, and name the crown to Christ my own. Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? Let's go ahead and greet some neighbors as you get seated.
hot mic. Good morning. I'm Joe. I'm one of the pastors, and if I haven't got a chance to meet you yet, I'd love to do that. Usually I loiter, I don't know how you want to use it, up front, and so I'll be up here or chasing some children around too if you want to catch me. Then just a couple things I want to bring before you this morning. We have a new resources corner that if you walk out into the foyer, into the right-hand side over there. You can't miss it because it's a bookshelf with resources, and it has a sign above it that says resources. So we have a lot of people are asking Ben and myself for different resources on different things, and so we've just kind of compiled what we have and put it on that shelf. It is for you to use if you see fit. We also have a select number of copies of this book called Rest and War by Ben Stewart. Pastor Ben Stewart, not Ben Jones, is a pastor at Passion City Church in Washington, D.C. He is one of the speakers that our students have listened to regularly as we attend Passion Camp. But this whole idea is understanding that we as believers are engaged in a war, a spiritual battle. And this will help give you just some encouragement on having rhythms for that battle as it comes and as it goes. And so we have a select number of copies, like I said. They're on a small table that is right by the exit door. So if you want to grab those as you as you exit the building, those are there for you as well. I've had a number of people contact me this last week asking me what Bible reading plan I'm doing. And I've talked about this a handful of times. A number of years ago, I started listening to the audio Bible. I do it when I drive or as I'm cleaning or whatever I'm doing around the house, making a lunch. I'll just select my plan, and this year I'm going through a chronological plan. I did not do that last year. I went through a different kind of plan, but this year I'm doing a 5-day chronological plan, setting myself up for success, because I know I'm probably going to miss a day or two during the week, and I only have to do 5, so it's great. So I use that, and you are only 8 days behind if you start today, and that's okay, right? That's okay. You don't have to rush to catch up. You see, the idea is that we are engaging in God's Word on a consistent basis. And so I would recommend finding an audio Bible or finding a reading plan that you can do if you actually want to sit down and read, to listen. You see, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is Bible fluency. And you can't be fluent in something. Think about language, right? Like, we can't be fluent in language if we're illiterate, right? Like, I can't expect my 4-year-old son to know all of the ins and outs of the English language. I mean, I don't even expect myself to know all the ins and outs of the English language, but I don't expect him. And so he is illiterate, really, when it comes to reading and somewhat writing. And what we want to do is move him from illiterate to literate, where he can read and he can write and he can start to understand these things. And eventually, hopefully, he's going to become fluent in the English language. I don't think it's any different for us with how we approach the Word of God. Some of us in here may be biblically illiterate, and I want you to know that's okay for right now. You may know a few stories. You didn't really grow up in church, just what you've heard. Like, biblically, you're illiterate. You know it's all out there, but you don't know how they quite connect. And we want to move you from illiterate to literate so you can understand the Bible and how it's written and how to read it and how to study it. And eventually, the more and more and more that we go through the story of God, we're going to become fluent in it. We're going to see things in passage A that reminds us of something that we read or listened to weeks ago, and it's going to start to pop and just go from black and white TV. I don't know if many of you still understand black and white TV to color TV, right? And then it's going to go from color TV to 4K TV, right? And if you get to watch anything in 4K, you just know that the things pop out or in 3D. And so I would highly encourage you to find a Bible reading plan, an app on your phone, or something that you can follow along with. If you have questions about that or I don't know what to do, come talk to me. Next, we have our Equipping Hour classes. They started this week, and we had a great turnout this morning for our marriage class, which was fantastic from what I'm gathering, and is going to be a good track for the people who want to be engaged in that. And then we also have our Christian Story 2 class. Those are taking place at 9 a.m. If you're not here at 9, you're more than welcome to join us in those 2 classes. And then finally, next Sunday after church, we have a team meeting for all the music team members. So if you're involved in the music team, whether you play an instrument, you sing, you run sound or projection, or if you're interested in that, stick around after church. We're going to have lunch for you guys, and we're just going to kind of roll through our philosophy of a worship service, why we do what we do, and spend some time together in that way. So that's next Sunday after church. If you have questions about that, you can come and find me afterwards. We start this morning a 4-week series called Because of the Gospel. And this idea of because of the gospel, we can be, this morning we're going to look at we can be authentic, or we can be equipped, or we can be generous, or we can be faithful. And so my prayer over the last few weeks leading up to this is that God would work on our hearts in a way that's going to stir us to something, to some sort of movement. I don't think it's good and right for us as children of God, as followers of Jesus, to be stagnant. And so I know that there are ways that we can be more authentic, more equipped, more faithful, more generous. And so as we kind of lean into these kingdom ideals, it's been my prayer that God would speak to our hearts. And so would you just take a moment this morning and bow with me in prayer as we embark on this series? Father, would you speak to each individual in this room? Would you use that still, small voice that we see in your word to speak to our hearts, to communicate with our minds, and what it means to continually be developing as kingdom citizens. And God, that we would walk away from not just this morning and not just this series, but from our time that we've been able to spend worshiping you different. Because that's what you do. You make a difference and you create change and you do all these things. And I don't know that there's anyone in this room, God, that would say, I don't need to change. I'm good where I'm at, and be telling the truth. And so, God, would you begin this journey inside of our hearts that's going to then flow out into our actions, that because of the gospel, we can be all these things that you've called us to be. Father, this morning we just pray for those who are hurting, whether it's an emotional hurt, a physical hurt, dealing with grief and the loss of a loved one, dealing with sickness, or maybe just simply not understanding why things are the way that they are. God, would you remind them in that spot that you see them and that you do care for them and that you've called them to this place, to this body, to this church to be cared for as well. And God, would you enable us? Would you empower us to rise up to that calling, to care for the people that walk into our doors, to care for the people that you have brought on our paths during the day and during the week? Would you help us to see with the eyes that you have those who are around us? In Jesus' name, amen. I don't know about you, but I feel sometimes a tension that develops between orthodoxy and orthopraxy, basically right doctrine and right living. Like, I don't think anyone in this room would be like, I don't need right doctrine, right? Like, we're all like, yes, right doctrine is essential. I need to have right doctrine if I'm going to be a follower of Jesus. And I don't think that anybody in this room would say, I don't need to live right. I can just know the right stuff. I don't actually have to live it out. I don't think we'd be in those camps. But when we have right doctrine and right living, there's going to be a tension where the rubber meets the road. And what does it look like now to live out the right doctrine? How do I correctly live what I correctly believe from God's word? And so what we have now is we have the gospel that's going to enter into these places, these desperately needed places, in order to find, hopefully, this balance between right doctrine and right living. And see, here's the fun part about this is, you have this striving for authenticity, for being real, right? I'm just going to be who God made me to be. And now whether you come at that from a biblical worldview or a non-biblical worldview, that seems to be a theme that is playing out in the lives of people now as we see different generations grow and grow and grow, right? I got to be the me that I feel like I should be. And you see, the world is fighting for this space. Yes, be who you want. Go after your desires. All of these things, like it's all about you. And you see, we as the church, we need to enter into this arena. We need to fight against the truth that the culture is trying to promote. And I say the word truth in quotation marks. So we enter into this space, not just for our sake as believers, as followers of Jesus, but for the unbeliever as well. Because we live in a society, in a day, in an age where our authenticity before God and before others is overshadowed by our need to protect ourselves, right? Well, I've been hurt, I've been burned, people have said things against me, or you don't know my past, you don't know my story, so I have to wall things off, right? You can get into this area of my life, but you have to stay away from these areas of my life. You see, we get to decide what is authentic about us, and that is not the way kingdom citizens ought to live. Because authenticity is the key to developing a real relationship. To be authentic with God and to be authentic with others is going to lead us into a deeper relationship with God and with others. Instead, like without authenticity, we kind of wander around under the own illusions, like we have it all together, right? And everyone else seems to have it all together. I mean, you scroll through social media, and we just went through Christmas time. I did not see any pictures of families fighting on social media, right? I did not. All I saw was, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, look at all my awesome family. What you didn't see is the 47 pictures before that where everybody was crying and trying to tackle one another, right? Like, it's this authenticity space. And it's really exhausting to wear a mask over and over and over and over again. But it's also hard work, which means it's going to be tiring to be authentic with God and with others. You see, when we are not authentic, we're never fully able to realize the power of God's truth in our life. You see, with authenticity, we're able to finally begin to see ourselves as we have been seen by God. We're able to allow ourselves to grow in a way that God intends us to grow. And so this morning we are going to begin in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. As we talk about this idea of this veil that some of us like to put over areas in our life and how that can negatively impact the pursuit of authenticity. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, starting in verse 12 is where we're going to be. Second Corinthians chapter 3, verse 12. Since we have such a hope, we are very bold. Not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face so that the Israelites might not gaze at the outcome of what was being brought to an end. But their minds were hardened. For to this day, when they read the Old Covenant, the same veil remains unlifted, because only through Christ is it taken away. Yes, to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their hearts. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image, from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. And so you have this idea, like Paul, what he's doing is he's comparing and he's contrasting with the Corinthians the old covenant, the Mosaic covenant, and this new covenant that now has been inaugurated and initiated in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, okay? But he kind of goes off and he says something here that caught my attention, that threw me back to the book of Exodus, to a story that I thought I understood. Now, the story that we'll get to in a minute is comparing what Moses would do after he would meet with God, right? And so if you want to jump to Exodus chapter 34, you can. It's going to be on the screen for us as well. But here's what Exodus 34 says. And maybe you know this part of the story, and maybe you don't. It's okay. But this is talking about Moses' face after he would meet with God. When Moses came, in verse 29, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, and as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he'd been talking with God, right? So he spent time with God, and that time with God directly reflected on his person. Like he left the presence of God different than when he entered the presence of God. And in this instance, is his face was shining, okay? And so here's what you have going on. Verse 30, Aaron and all the people of Israel saw Moses, and behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the people of Israel came near, and he had commanded them all that the Lord had spoken with him in Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. Now, so here's how I understood the story before. I understood the story that Moses met with God, right? And I knew that when Moses met with God, his face was shining, like the radiance of the glory of God was on his person. Like you could physically tell that Moses went up the mountain one way and he came down a different way. Like he was shining, okay? Now, I had always understood this story to be like when he came down, everyone was afraid. And that's what it says. Like they were all afraid. And so in order for Moses to be with the people, he had to cover his face. He put the veil over his face in order to be with the people. That's how I understood it. But then if you actually read the text, that's not exactly how it goes. You see, yes, they were all afraid. Moses has got shiny-faced Moses. He's walking in, and then the people are afraid, and so they're like, whoa, I don't want anything to do with that. And instead of putting the veil over his face here, what he does is he calls Aaron and the people to him. And the people and Aaron come to him, and then the text tells us that Moses then gave the instruction to the people that he received from God. And it was not until after he was done instructing them that he put the veil over his face. Now, in my mind, before, if everyone is afraid of Moses and shining face, and I don't know how to deal with that, and what should we do, he would put the veil over his face so they wouldn't be afraid. But if that's not what the text is telling me, my mind says there has to be a different reason why he put the veil over his face. And thank you, Paul, for giving us what I believe is that reason back in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. He says, we are very bold. We have a hope. But not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face. Why? So the Israelites might not gaze at the outcome of what was being brought to an end. So I thought, what is being brought to an end? In this instance, when Moses is covering his face, it's not the old covenant that's being brought to an end, so it has to be something else. And so maybe this is sanctified imagination. I did look up a few different commentaries, and I found like this is a common thought amongst commentators, is that Moses veiled his face so that the people would not see the shining of his face go away. I mean, this is the guy, right? Like Moses is the guy. He's the one that meets with God, and he's the one that delivers all the instruction from God to the people. He is the leader. His face is shining. But then what happens when the leader, the shining from his face starts to go away? What happens when the insecurity or the shortcomings or the weaknesses of Moses or of you or me start to creep in? What does Moses do? He puts a veil. He covers his face. He tries to cover the thing that was diminishing. And Paul says this isn't what it's like for us. He says we have hope and we can be bold. You see, that term parousia is a Greek term. That means you can be shameless in your speech. And that is exactly what Paul was. If you study the life of Paul and you know how he ministered and started churches through the book of Acts and how he wrote in his letters, like he was shameless and he was bold in the way that he proclaimed the message. You see, there was nothing that he had to hide. And he says, we're not like Moses. You see, Moses kept the veil over his face to cover up the fact that the glory was fading, indicating that outside of the very presence of God, our own finite, sinful inadequacy cannot maintain the glory of God. The glory of God is a glory that we as humanity seek for ourselves. Like, this is what happened in the garden. Humanity decided that they were going to take something that they were not ready for and they were not offered. They wanted to take that glory, to be like the one who created him. But here in Exodus, it's God's glory that he shared with Moses. But as soon as he stepped away, you see the weakness of humanity to carry that glory. And so the veil represents an attempt to protect and to preserve one's reputation, which is something we all do. Like, none of us in this room have not done something or said something or acted in a certain way in order to protect our own reputation or what people think about us. I don't know about you, but approval is something I struggle with mightily. Like, I want people to approve of me. I want to feel as if everything is good. I want them to, lift me up. That's a desire that I have. And if I don't, then my mind starts to play all these games. Well, they must not like me. And then so I start to project on all the people that are not approving of me verbally or however else it would be done. Like, I start to project, well, they must not like me. I must have hurt them. I must have said something to them. I must have did something to them. And you start to spin around in your mind. I don't know if this is you ever, but this is me. Like, I'm a mess, straight up, okay? Just so you're all aware. Because I'm seeking to protect and to preserve this image that I think I have. We do it as parents, right? We want our kids to act a certain way, to say and not say certain things, to do and to achieve certain things. Why? Because we think it projects on who we are as people and as parents. Or maybe even in your marriage, right? In our marriage, where we might argue and fight and have conflict time after time after time, but when we're around people, we have to put on this veil so that no one can see the weaknesses and the imperfections and the struggle that we are involved in. And by the way, if that's you, I'm not saying it is, but if it's you, like, the best thing to do is to drag those darknesses into the light. And we have that equipping class for anyone who would be ready and willing to do that. You see, our sufficiency is found in Christ alone. And what a veil does is it covers up our ability to see Christ for who he is. And doesn't just mask our imperfections and weaknesses and sinfulness. It prevents us from seeing Christ for who he is. And so these masks and veils, they obscure our ability to see Christ clearly, but they also distract others from seeing Christ in us. And you see that through the text, Paul is very clear here. He says, the veil that once covered the face of Moses eventually covered the hearts of the Israelites. Because every veil we put on, every mask that we put on our face is going to make its way to our heart. Like, it cannot stay in place and just be something that covers what we think as sinfulness and weaknesses or inadequacies or shortcomings or all the things that we are self-conscious about and not make its way here. Because when it attacks here, it starts to grab a hold of all of the things that are in our life. And this prevents us from being authentic with others and with God. And here's what's crazy. Like, you and I, we try to put on a mask, maybe you don't, I do, in front of God. I try to say, God, I have it all together. Did you see I went to church 50 out of the 52 weeks this year? And he's like, you're a pastor. Did you see that, God? Did you see how much money I gave? Did you see how many people I talked to about Jesus? And he's like, yeah, I see all that, bro. But I also see the ugly. I see the darkness. I see the struggle. And it's in those moments I'm like, no, you don't know. That does not exist. And so with people, we can hide it. But with God, we can't. And yet, we are fully known by God and fully loved. Like, I know my wife, and I know my children. I don't know them fully, but I know them better than you know them, and I know them better than I know you. Just like those close relationships you have. You know them better than anyone else, but you know what? I don't know them fully. I don't know the deep desires and intents of their hearts. I can guess. I can see how it kind of plays out, but I don't know them. But in my relationship with God, I am fully known. I am exposed. Imagine that. Every bitter thought and every evil deed that I have ever done is fully known. and I am fully loved, because the grace and the mercy and the love and the sacrifice of Jesus is greater than all of those things. And so when God looks down on me, yes, there's ugliness and there's darkness, and there's a lot of issues that I have, and he knows all of them, and he says, you're still mine. And as children of the kingdom, as followers of Jesus, I don't think we can get to that point, but it does not mean we stop striving to get to that point. And you're like, why would I attempt something? Why would I attempt to go to a goal that I know I can never reach? Because in the journey, we become transformed into this image of who Jesus is and what he has for us. You see, Paul writes in 17 and 18. He says this, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, with unveiled face, before God, you can try to put as many masks and as many veils on as you want before God, but he is just going to straight up dissolve those things, right? We all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to the next. You see, when we come to Jesus, the power of the Spirit transforms our lives. When we come confessing our own inadequacy, and we confess our inadequacy, and we claim his adequacy, you see, we understand that our confidence isn't found in ourselves, in our riches, in our gifts, in our positions, in our power, in our prestige, or accomplishments. You see, the liberating source in our life is the Spirit. If you want to experience freedom, you yield to the Spirit. You give those things over to the Spirit. So we don't have to live imprisoned in fear and shame and guilt. We don't have this constant need to impress anyone, especially God. And here's what's crazy. We don't transform ourselves under our own power. Like, you tried that? Oh, I'm just going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I'm going to get her done. I'm going to become a better man in 2023. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to be the best husband and best father. Like, good luck, bro. Like, we're 8 days in, and I've failed more times than I can count. It's not my power that transforms me. It's not my power that frees me to be authentic in front of God and in front of man. It's only the power of the Spirit. That's what freedom is. And so when we turn to Jesus with our finances, with our marriage, with our parenting, with our jobs, with our relationships, in our classrooms, on our teams, whatever it is, when we turn to Jesus with those things, what's he going to do? He's going to remove the veil. It says that Christ removes the veil. He takes off the mask. He's saying, it's okay to be where you're at. I love you right there. It's okay. And I love you right there, and I love you so much, I'm not going to let you stay there. I am going to help you. I'm going to go with you on this journey. He's not going to push us. He's going to lead us as a shepherd does. One pastor says, when talking about authenticity, he says, we impress with our strengths, but we connect with our weaknesses. And I don't know how many times I've talked with people over the last 12 to 18 months who have shared their stories with me, and I've been able to connect with them because it's something similar, some weakness, some sin that I have also struggled with. You see, there's power in our stories because our stories are part of a bigger story. The story of Joe Malarkey and his family and this church is part of a greater story of redemption and rescue and reconciliation. And so, if we stop trying to impress with our strengths, instead seek to connect with our weaknesses, we can bring healing to areas that God would have us bring healing to. We don't have to live any longer for the approval of people because we're more and more living from the approval of God. You see, the call to be a Jesus follower, to remove the veil, to live in the freedom that the Spirit brings, is a call to die to self and follow Jesus. You see, the life of a disciple maker is a life of denying ourselves. And so, real quick, in Luke chapter 9, verse 23, it's going to be on the screen, and here's what Jesus simply said to the people that were following him. And he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself Be vulnerable. It's not about you. And that is a lesson I have to learn way more than I want to, that it is not about me. There are definitely some things that I have to do in my position as a pastor that I don't want to do, right? And whether it's just because I don't want to do it because I don't want to do it, or maybe because I don't feel equipped, or whatever it is, like, it's not about me. Deny myself, be vulnerable. Here's the idea. We all need redemption. Like, there's not a single person in this room that does not need to be bought back from the darkness and the slavery that sin is. We're all on that level playing field. We all need redemption, and we all need renewal, whether it's in this moment or as your life as a whole. And so because we all need redemption and renewal, we have to be intentional to communicate our need to others regularly and understand the need that others have to do the same. And so a question I started asking myself at the end of every day: how did I need Jesus today? How did I need Jesus today? And if I forget to do it, it's how did I need Jesus yesterday? You see, in my desire to be free from the approval of others and to be authentic before God and people, I have to understand that I need Jesus. And that's okay. In fact, that's a really good place to be, to come to this understanding that I need Jesus. I need Jesus to do everything in my life. I need Jesus to feel the freedom that the Spirit brings. How do you need Jesus? So we take up our cross. We embrace the tension. You see, after we're vulnerable about our brokenness, and I think this is one of the really cool things that's coming from a lot of our small groups. We started small groups back in September. And a lot of things that we're hearing coming out of our small groups is a vulnerability that's coming out. And now, what do you do with that? Like, a lot of us don't know how to handle that. Like, someone's vulnerable with me. What do I do? I just pet, like, oh, you're going to be okay. Oh, I struggle with that too. Like, what does it look like then to embrace that tension, to take up our cross? And so after we've been vulnerable about our brokenness, we find our way to the cross, to the death, the burial, and the resurrection. And we know that He, in His grace, in His mercy, in His love, He has redeemed. He's bought things back. He's reconciled. He's fixed what was broken. He's rescued. He's done these things. And we don't just move on from it. What does it look like to linger there for a minute, for a day, to linger at the cross? Like, this journey into freedom, especially when it comes to authenticity, is it's going to be awkward, okay? Like, awkward is awesome sometimes, right? It's going to be emotionally uncomfortable, right? We can't just shy away from something that's hard and that we don't want to do. Because the journey to becoming more and more like Jesus, I'm not going to lie, is a painful process. It is, because anytime someone has to cut something that's inside of you out, it hurts. Like, I've never had a surgery where something on the inside then came on the outside. I've never had that. But I know people in here have. And I know that there's a recovery time and that there's pain that takes place. But you see, you're better now, hopefully, than you were before. You see, this is the whole idea of what it means, that I think what John and Jesus are getting at when it talks about, like, if you're going to abide in me, if you're going to remain in me, if you're going to live in me, there's some pruning that's going to take place. There's some things that are going to have to be dealt with. But thank God that He initiates the change in our life and He carries it out. Philippians 1 tells us that He who began a good work in you will see it through to completion. You see, other believers are in the middle of this journey of being authentic too, and sometimes they're not going to reciprocate, right? It's like, what do I do then? Do I just quit? Like, if I'm trying to be authentic and real with someone, like, I'm more concerned about being real than being right, and I'm trying to do that, like, and you're not reciprocating that, what do? Do I just walk away? Do I stop being authentic? Do I quit? No. We continue to faithfully take steps in our own journey. One of the things I've had to address over and over with a lot of people, not just my, my kids or our students, is that you can only control you. Like, you can't control anybody else. You can try to control them. But see, your journey is the only one that you have some sort of control over. Like, you can't make someone else be authentic. You can't make them desire to do these things. As a pastor, there's lots of things I want you to do. I can't make you do a single one of them. But what I can do is I can lead you in that way by being an example, by being a shepherd, by understanding who we all are in this journey, in our own individual journeys, and to walk with you. And so we deny ourselves, we take up our cross, and then we follow Jesus. And this is a daily thing. We get to live from his approval. We get to let his word cover us. We get to let Jesus become the hero of our story. And because he becomes the hero of our story, we get to see Jesus displayed endlessly in us. And as he is displayed in us, we get to be this light in a world that is just really, really dark. But see, as we deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow Jesus, we're only able to do these things because he did it first. That he did it for us so that we could be in right relationship with him, so that we could experience freedom. And so we're going to spend a few moments here at the table as a family. And in a moment, the elders are going to come and they're going to dispense the elements. And I'm just asking that you would hold it and we'll all take it together. This is a time for people who say that they are followers of Jesus. And if you're not at a place where you can say you're a follower of Jesus, it's okay to just let the tray pass by. Here's one of the beautiful things about my desire to be authentic. There's no shame. There's no shame. If you do not feel as if you are in a place where you are ready to receive communion, it's okay to let it pass by. There's no shame. Because there's an understanding that we're all in process, on a journey. We're all making our way to being transformed into the image of one degree of glory to the next, to be more and more like Jesus. There is no shame when there is freedom. But I hope that we understand that the reason we have life, and the reason we have hope, and the reason we have breath, and the reason that we have the ability to do any of these things on a much grander scale is because what Jesus did for us first and foremost. That he allowed his body to be broken, and he allowed his blood to be shed so that you and I could receive forgiveness for our sins, for the darkness that's inside of us, for those bitter thoughts and for those evil deeds, so that we could have hope and restoration with the one who made us. And so the elders are going to come forward, and I'm going to ask that we just kind of take this time and spend this with Jesus before we partake of the elements. Jesus, I'm glad that you see us where we're at, and you love us in this moment, and you love us so much you don't want us to stay where we're at, that you desire something better, something more than we could ever ask or imagine. And you don't just want that for us, you're ready to lead us to those living waters. And so, would you continue in your spirit to speak to us? In Jesus' name. on the night he was betrayed, he took bread, he gave thanks, blessed it, and he broke it. He said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." After the meal, he took the cup, and he says, "This is the new covenant. This is my blood. This is going to be the fulfillment of the prophets, where God said, I'm going to write my word on your heart. I'm going to remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. I'm going to put my spirit inside of you, and that spirit is the same spirit that leads to freedom." It's because of this. He said, "Remember me every time you eat this bread and drink this cup, because in doing so, we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. And if he's coming again, it means he isn't dead. It means he's alive." And so that's what we do this morning. We celebrate, we rejoice, and we remember the life that we have in Jesus, the freedom that we have in the Spirit. You won't find anyone here who has it all together. If they say they do, they're lying. Just throw that out there. But we can't be afraid to be real and authentic. And I understand it's scary. It's scary to be real. It's scary to be vulnerable. It's scary to be authentic. But that fear that you have is not the freedom that is promised in the Spirit. And one of our biggest barriers to living an authentic life is guarding areas that we don't want anybody to know about, the darkness, the weakness, the sin, to guard those things. You see, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. You see, we might have been taught inadvertently or overtly that what we do and who we are isn't enough. And you see, the gospel says the exact opposite. It says, I love you where you're at. You don't have to do anything, and I love you. And I love you, and you don't have to do anything because Jesus is the one who did it all for us, that we just get to come and behold who he is. He has something better for every one of us. Our stories of struggle and despair and anxiety and success and hope and a future. When we are authentic with those stories before God and before others, we're going to see healing. We're going to see hope. We're going to see changed lives. This is what he's calling us to as followers of Jesus. All we simply do is give ourselves to that and try to be faithful every step. Would you stand and sing with us?
lost without hope and no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began, ash was redeemed, omega